Hello, everyone. I'm Jim Garrison, and in the spirit of the trees, in the spirit of all of living nature, I want to welcome you to this session of the Great Books, which we convene monthly as one of our graduate seminars out of our wisdom school, where every 2 months, we do 6 books a year, we take on a work, either contemporary or ancient, that has been considered great. Great because it speaks to us about deep issues of human concern. Great because it is honored across cultures and across time. And great because in reading it, one encounters an intelligence not one's own, that transforms one's perceptions and psyche and soul. Books have probably had as major an impact on human history and human culture, human thinking, human values, human perceptions of the afterlife, as any teacher who's ever lived who didn't write books. So when we encounter a great book, we're encountering another intelligence from the deep past or the deep presence that comes from eternity. And I wanted to enter into this particular month. We're going to have 2 lectures by Thomas Hübl, who I'll introduce in a moment, on the Tao de Ching, which I have lectured on, as you may remember, a number of years ago, because I consider the Tao de Ching to be the most profound work of antiquity, because it's the one work that got nature as it really is and understood that the most fundamental thing human beings could do is align themselves with the Tao, with the natural way. And I wanted to start and tee Thomas up by a book I just finished and I am extremely excited about. And I'm trying to get the author for Humanity Rise. It's called Finding the Mother Tree by Suzanne Simard, Canadian scientist who loved trees, was born the daughter of loggers, and she dedicated her life to proving scientifically that trees are not only alive and communicate with one another, as we all generally know, but what she has now clinically proven is that the way the trees and the mycelia and the plants and the roots and the trunks and the leaves communicate with each other is basically replicated by the human brain. About 3 weeks ago, there was an article that took this insight into its next refinement, which is literally a Copernican revolution, where they have now discovered that not only do these organisms communicate in a neural network, but they now tracked exactly how they do it through sending electrical pulses. And guess what? The electrical pulses that they send are structured just like human language. So before too long, we're going to know what the trees and the mushrooms are actually saying. They think they've got about 40 words. And they haven't figured out what they mean yet. But part of the Copernican revolution of our time, everyone, is that we humans don't speak, think, feel, act as somehow something different from nature. Nature, hundreds of millions of years ago, at least on our planet, developed the communication system that we were given and which we have refined. But it's not separate. It's just the next upgrade in how nature communicates. So I just wanted to bring that in because I was personally excited by it. And as you all know, I consider the Tao de Ching to be the masterwork of antiquity. And it gives me great pleasure in this respect to introduce Thomas Hübl. He's having a little bit of challenge. He just did a Zoom upgrade. Oh, there he is. We just lost him again. But Thomas Hübl, as Dr. Szabo, who convenes this seminar with me, knows, he just passed his PhD with one of the most brilliant dissertations we've ever had. Thomas, as you know from sessions that he's done on Humanity Rising and his general coursework, we have a major partnership at Ubiquity between Ubiquity and his Academy of Inner Sciences. He has led groups all over the world. His particular focus is trauma, particularly transgenerational trauma, and how individuals, how cultures, how nations can be caught up in transgenerational trauma, and how we can heal, how we can transform that shadow content into an alchemical process that redeems our soul. And when he was going through the PhD process, we were shaping up the calendar for this year. So Georgie had the bright idea, why don't we ask Thomas what book he would like to talk about? And it was the Tao de Ching. So Thomas, welcome. Yeah. Or should I say Dr. Hübl, welcome.
Thank you.
And we turn the program over to you.
Thank you, Jim. And so lovely to hear about the language. It's amazing. It's really amazing. Wow, fascinating. That's it. And it's a great intro to the Tao teaching, as you know.
Yes.
Yeah, fantastic. So yeah, so thank you. And hello from my side to everyone who's listening. Yes, the Tao. I was like, when I was 26, I left my medical studies at the time, and which I loved, and I went on the 4-year meditation retreat. And there wasn't much that I took with me, but the Tao de Ching was a very important source for me. And so today will be, the first part will be kind of a contemplative time. I will read a few, I made like 2 sets of teachings that the Tao provides many, but for today we will go deeper into the meditative, contemplative part. And next time we will go stronger into the guidance for living our life part of the Tao. And at the beginning, I want to say something that, you know, when I consider life having 3 categories of books, like roughly, I mean, there are many, but that's 3 major streams. One is the books that we read that have been written at a certain time, and they describe the process of life around that era or time span. And they are being read, and then they also fade away after some time. Some of them stick around a bit longer, but then there are sacred books. And in the mystical teachings, like, a sacred book is a bit different. A sacred book contains the reader. And so when we read books like the Tao de Ching, the difference between a regular book are letters, a sacred text are open letters. They are not fully kind of crystallized into one reality, they hold the possibility for many realities. And then there is life, which is the one book. And I think for mystics, learning to read the one book is kind of our deepest practice, our deepest devotion, our deepest worship, meditation, is to be, that's why I often say the wisdom is in a way the world that we can include in the way we live. So the wiser, the more of what we call sometimes the external world can be represented inside. We don't feel separate, but kind of a sense of interbeing. And that means that I include in the way I speak, I act, I live, more and more of the world in the way I move. And I think the Tao is a genius expression of that movement. It becomes more and more effortless. And it speaks to, because the non-action in the Tao is not that we are not doing anything, but that the action arises out of the flow of life. And it's neither pushing nor resisting the river. If I push the river, I create a wave. And if I resist the river, I also create a wave. But if my hand is as fast as the river, I don't feel, it's just a stream, it's a flow. And so sacred books are kind of the bridge to learn to read the book, which is the moment to moment to moment to moment unfolding of life. And so for today, I selected a few because I believe every part of the Tao is so rich that every time we read it, we discover a new world in it, and a new reality, and a new reality, because the letters are open, they are not closed. When the letters are closed, they have a meaning, they have a perspective, they look at life in a certain way. When they're open, we, the reader, we are kind of included in the sacred text. And so I will read a few paragraphs, and what I will read is from the Tao de Ching, the translation of Stephen Mitchell, which I like because it speaks of the master in sometimes in he and sometimes in she. So I like the translation. And today I want to look a little bit at the notion of what in some traditions called emptiness. And it's a bit tricky with emptiness because, you know, even an empty photo is a photo. So sometimes our mind is very creative. And when we imagine emptiness, we imagine something. But the big traditions, including the Tao, but also other big mystical traditions, practice not to create an image of God. And that's pretty hard because our thinking is used to create images of the world. So that's why some of the verses I will read are pointing to that emptiness. But once we point towards it, it seems like it's somewhere and it can be found, which is the big challenge of every spiritual practice. So here I will start with, I will also say what kind of verse, and as I said, it's Stephen Mitchell's translation. Where is that now? Yeah. And it's number 1. The Tao that can be told is not the eternal Tao. The name that can be named is not the eternal name. The unnameable is eternally real. Naming is the origin of all particular things. Free from desire, you realize the mystery. Caught in desire, you see only the manifestations. Free from desire, you realize the mystery. Caught in desire, you see only the manifestations. Yet, mystery and manifestations arise from the same source. The source is called darkness. Darkness within darkness. The gateway to all understanding. So darkness within darkness, the gateway to all understanding. So I will read the second one, then I will speak a bit to why I chose this. This is number 21. The master keeps her mind always at one with the Tao. That is what gives her her radiance. The Tao is ungraspable. How can her mind be at one with it? Because she doesn't cling to ideas. The Tao is dark and unfathomable. How can it make her radiant? Because she lets it. Since before time and space were, the Tao is. It is beyond is and is not. How do I know this is true? I look inside myself and see. So, before I continue reading a little bit more, the master keeps her mind always at one with the Tao. But how can her mind be at one with it? Because she doesn't cling to ideas. So the notion of spiritual emptiness is, in a way, a deep, can only be realized either by like a cosmic lightning, like a cosmic lottery win. So that's not in our hands anyway. So that suddenly something opens up and that's the way it is, or that's the way it always has been, it will be. And, or it's through practice. And for most of us, since we are not just waiting if that lottery win will happen, so we are practicing in the meanwhile. And in the practice of stillness, and stillness is also a way, is a process from or at least in our practice and the practice we do in our community, we go from mindfulness, which is a infusion of awareness into sense perception. So when I feel the room, when I feel my body, and I bring a lot of awareness into my sense perception, inside and outside. From there, we open up into spaciousness, into a more subtle inner state of stillness. So I experience more inner space, and that deepens stillness into one moment of another state that arises or appears, is what we call magnetic presence or causal stillness, which doesn't have any expansion, doesn't have anything to point to. The opposite, my thoughts, my body sensations, many things in a way disappear in stillness. And then there's one deeper state, is kind of an absorption in the source of creation. And so when the master doesn't cling to ideas, it shows me in deep meditation, the deeper I go in meditation, how my mind is kind of a photo library. I made photos of the entire world and everything that I can think about. And it's kind of a process of seeing those photos, but becoming more aware of the space itself that contains the photos. And it's a bit similar when we read a book. Most probably after a few minutes, we forget that we're looking at paper. But every letter is defined by the space that gives the letter space to arise. So in the creation of the Tao, the divine needs to create space for worlds to appear. So there's spaciousness, and the practice of spaciousness shows me more and more the nature of my ideas, the nature of my sensations, the nature of my perception. But it subject-object transcends those into deeper and deeper states of stillness, basically. And the last sentence of the last verse 21 says, how do I know this is true? And then it says an interesting sentence. I look inside myself and see. And so we could look at that as twofold. We can look at it as I look inside myself and I see something inside. Or I can say, I look inside myself and see. It's not I see something, I see. And that's interesting. Then seeing is not that I see something inside myself, like I look inside myself, I see thoughts, I see sensations, I have insights, I see something. The Tao doesn't talk about this. The Tao talks about seeing is presence. So seeing is presence, is clarity. And then the next step is that we see something. So either I look inside myself and I see something deep inside myself, or I look inside myself and there is seeing. And that's an interesting difference. Because when we have presence, and we have trauma, then trauma splits presence into the past and the mirror world, like a future, that we need to reintegrate that past into presence. But as long as they're split, there are two. A question and an answer. So that's why the wisdom teachings, they don't give advice like how to do things. They look at what splits the question from the answer. Why are they two? And a good spiritual practice is not giving me an answer how to do things, but it helps me to unify the past and the fake future, the mirror world, to become again presence. And in presence, there is seeing, there's clarity. So I look inside myself and see. And in the seeing, because it says also, she keeps her mind at one with the Tao. How does she do it? By not getting attached to the ideas and by holding those ideas in a transcended space. Not that ideas are suddenly only absent. They can be here, like everything, but held in space, or held in stillness, or as not two. And that's a very powerful, for many meditation practitioners, a very powerful switch, which also includes the notion of arriving. I sometimes say that, like, how do we notice senior practitioners? These are the ones that stop asking how long it's going to take. How long do I still need to do healing work? How long do I still need to practice? But what that implies is that I forward project my own death onto the Tao or onto God. And if my lifetime becomes the defining space for my awakening or enlightenment, then I'm really in a hurry. And if I'm really in a hurry, then certain people and situations will feel like obstacles because they prevent me from running my marathon and getting there. So often, for a certain part of my practice, the arrival is more important than the walking. And that's a sign like that I'm constantly a little bit too late. It's still coming. Like awakening is still coming. And I think one part of our awakening process is to see that as long as my own mortality is the limitation of my spiritual journey, the whole journey is about me, not about the Tao and not about God or the Absolute. It's about me. It's about me arriving, me getting there. And so that's why I think the Tao in its deeper essence describes that beautifully, how we let go of some of the ideas and we look inside ourselves and become seeing. And seeing means that we kind of rest in the center of the book of life, which is reality itself, life itself, every interaction, every moment, every step. This is the unfolding of the Tao. And in verse number 25, it says, there was something formless and perfect before the universe was born. It is serene, empty, solitary, unchanging, infinite, and eternally present. It is the mother of the universe, and for a lack of a better name, I call it the Tao. It flows through all things, inside and outside, and returns to the origin of all things. The Tao is great. The universe is great. Earth is great. Man is great. These are the four great powers. Man follows the earth. Earth follows the universe. The universe follows the Tao, and the Tao follows only itself. So man follows the earth. That's what Jim said at the beginning. Like we are deeply embedded in the biosphere. We are deeply embedded in the consciousness of the earth. The earth follows the universe. We are deeply embedded in the movement of the universe. The universe follows the Tao, and the Tao follows only itself. So in a way, in the spiritual practice, does it mean the Tao follows only itself? Or when we use a term that has a more allergy potential, we could say the realm of the divine or God is not our business as human beings. That's what we bow down to. Because nobody can make the divine an object of consciousness. So it can only be realized through grace. It's being realized by bowing. Why bowing? Because when I bow, I can receive a blessing. When I know I can't receive a blessing, I closed the circle. When I keep the circle open, like in the Zen circle, the Enzo, that's awake. Because there's always the dimension of not knowing makes me a lifelong learner. I am constantly studying life. And I might know a lot, and I'm continuously discovering. Because I'm not anymore intent upon arriving. Like the Tao says, a good traveler is not intent upon arriving. And this means when my own death is not the limitation of my awakening. I discover love. Because if I walk forever, which is not a long time and a bit longer, but if I walk forever, I have time for now. Which means I taste real love. Because suddenly the obstacles of my life and that which is the obstacle to me getting there is not anymore an obstacle. It's part of my life. It's part of my walking. And like this, I have the presence and the love and the compassion to make whatever looks like a difficulty or a problem or a delay, this becomes my life. And I will read later on one verse of the Tao that speaks to that. But before that, so the realm of the divine is what I bow down to, because that can be realized only through the blessing. But the world from let there be light, from something, from nothing to something, creation itself, that's what spiritual mastery is about. Like how from the moment that energy was born or is being born to how we sit in a manifest world, in this body, in this reality, that's spiritual mastery. So the laws of energy can be mastered. The divine is what we, or the Tao is what we bow down to. And that's why, in a way, what in some traditions is called the divine law, which is not a law that we usually see as law, which is kind of a regulation or an outside reflection of my inner missing ethical alignment, like a kind of a regulation. The divine law is basically the language of the universe. It's the language of creation. And it's also part of it is the language of nature. And that's why it's beautiful. It's a very good reminder for our time. It says, man follows the earth. And partly what we are trying to do at the moment on the planet is we want to make earth follow man. That's a kind of an autoimmune disease. It's like we reverse the flow of energy. If we follow the natural order, things will find their place. If we try to enforce our will or dominate, we create inflammation. One collective inflammation is a war. But if we follow the flow, that water flows down the mountain. And if we follow that flow, that water flows down the mountain. Then I know where to bow and I know where to give. That's beauty. Beauty means that we are part of the natural order. Man follows the earth follows the universe follows the Tao. The Tao follows only itself. Also the four great states, the physical, the subtle, the causal, and the non-dual. And within, there is a directionality. And that's the divine law. And so in this verse, which is verse 25, it says something else that I consider as important. Because it says, It's the mother of the universe, and it flows through all things, inside and outside. And it returns to the origin of all things. And that's I think a very important part too, because it says it's not just the divine or the Tao, it's not just everything that hosts creation. No, it says it flows through everything and it nourishes everything. So the Tao is directly part and affecting every moment. Like the divine is moment to moment, like has agency in a way within our lives. It's immanent and transcendent. So it's not just the I, as Ken Wilber says, that is part, but also, as Ken also says, it's immanent in everything. And that's very important for our lives, because sometimes we, and I believe that today the word that we use is trauma or dissociation, numbness, absencing. We don't feel that. And then life becomes very lonely, because it says it nourishes everything. It cares for everything, it says somewhere else in the Tao. And so then my life or even my healing process becomes like running a marathon. It's upon me, it's a personal journey, it's a personal quest. But sometimes the personal quest, which is also partly true, I need to invest something into my journey. I need practice. I need to invest in my journey. And at the same time, there's a lot of grace. There's a lot of spirit or Tao that flows through everything that is part of it. That's an amazing resource. And in my understanding of trauma healing or collective trauma healing, which is a factor that is around for thousands and thousands of years, collective trauma is here for a long time. The spiritual resource that the Tao flows through everything is a very, very powerful part of the healing process, because it constantly reminds us of a bigger context, and it gives us a tremendously strong resource for healing itself. And so I believe that the Tao points to that beautifully. And then we can open the space for questions. I have one or two more things I wanted to bring. Yeah. And that speaks a bit to what I said before, that what's the power that walking, like my moment-to-moment life, and the depth of walking. On the one hand, depth can be described as ancientness, which in a way also Jim at the beginning pointed to, with like there are many layers or levels of life and evolution, that are living as the concentrated liquid of evolution, millions of years of evolution in our bodies. That's ancient. Sometimes we don't feel that anymore because we feel disconnected in our personal life. Like we lost a bit the connection to how rich and precious this is. That we are living in all that wisdom. And some of the ancient traditions also keep on constantly reminding us, like the Tao. At the same time, there's a difference between ancient and timeless. Timeless is a different state of witnessing. It transcends space-time. And so there's ancientness and timelessness. And when walking has the depth of both. And then presencing and look inside myself and see becomes obvious. And here's one last bit that speaks to that I think is a beautiful expression of, that also leads us maybe then to the next book talk about the Tao, more about the way of living. Every being in the universe is an expression of the Tao. It's verse 51. It springs into existence, unconscious, perfect, free, takes on a physical body, and lets circumstances complete it. It takes on a physical body and lets circumstances complete it. That is why every being spontaneously honors the Tao. The Tao gives birth to all beings, nourishes them, maintains them, cares for them, comforts them, protects them, takes them back into itself, creating without possessing, acting without expecting, guiding without interfering. That is why the love of the Tao is in the very nature of things. So when the Tao describes, the Tao de Ching, Lao Tse describes beautifully when we live our life, like how wisdom matures us, the aspects or sometimes the difficulties, the challenges that we meet complete us. Like what's my relation to the challenges in my life? Either I develop like a capacity to be with it, to be in it, and to see the completion that brings into my life. So it shows me a part of myself that needs more illumination in order to transcend the separation I carry inside. So let the circumstances complete us. And that capacity, I believe, in what I would call a more embodied spiritual practice, like for all of us that are living in culture and have a purpose in culture, follow like a purpose in this world and don't go to renounced in a cave somewhere and was never seen again. Like we need an embodied spiritual practices, otherwise we start to suffer from the side effects of a disembodied spiritual practice. And so when my capacity to really be with and bring the light of my consciousness deeply into the challenge, that's spiritual courage. That I activate all my energy centers that transmit the light of my soul, or the Tao that nourishes everything, into the situations. And that's the engine or the power of reunification. And I think then our spiritual practice becomes a massive resource that closes a gap that sometimes we see between like spiritual practices and activism in the world. And I think also Ubiquity is deeply interested in closing that gap and unifying that gap, that we can be deeply engaged in the world and deeply inspired by the Tao, by spirit, by the divine, by God, whatever name we give that deepest state and force in the world. So to summarize a little bit, and then I would love to open this. We have still some time for dialogue or questions or comments. So today we spoke about the deeply transcendent power of the Tao, the mother of the universe, that which cannot be named, like the shedding of ideas about spirituality, about the divine, about the Tao, about like how we name things or we create kind of inner images. And what's the practice of letting go of those and emptying the photo library, even the empty photos. And so that's a deep part of the practice. But we also spoke to the power that the Tao has in each and every moment, or the impact, the immanence of the divine creation, moment to moment to moment, and how we in our life can be consciously aware, consciously connected, and even make that power our ally in life. And I think that's a deep connection of whatever our soul purpose is. If our soul purpose is in engaging in the climate crisis, engaging in social justice, or in decolonizing the world, or in healing, or in all of it, I think thousands of years of Taoism and thousands of years of wisdom, that our life is already included in. I think that's really amazing. That sacred texts embrace the reader with their timelessness and include all times. So maybe until the next time, we take a break here, and maybe we can just take a few moments to let that rest and see how that lands in everybody. And then see how that resonates within you, within your life, what resonates, what maybe doesn't. And okay, so Jim and Georgie, let's.
Thomas, thank you so much. This was sublime. This was just sublime. You embodied the essence of the Tao de Ching. So thank you for that. Thank you for starting your contemplation on this great masterwork in such a contemplative, meditative way, because I think that's the only way to approach the Tao. So thank you for that. Georgie, what are your comments or questions? And then I want to see the hands go up for all of our students out there after Georgie is done. Thank you, Thomas. Georgie.
Yeah, thanks. Thank you so much, Thomas. This was so amazing. I really, you were conveying some universal truth and love and wisdom. And I really felt that throughout. It was just like a meditation I never experienced before. And I have some reflections which I would like to share with you. Just really segueing back to the beginning of your presentation, when you're talking about books, that how you become one with a book. And straight away I thought about the flow state, that clearly with not every book you have that experience when you really feel that the outside world just ceases to exist. Really, it is just, there is that oneness, and almost that as you're turning the page, you already know what is written, right? So because you really accessing that universal wisdom, because you the reader with the book, with the information, with the knowledge, that becomes so accessible that time flies. There is no time. There is nothing. So there is that amazing beingness that is so unique. I'm a great reader, and I love that when I find books that take me to that space. So thank you very much for invoking that memory again within me. I also loved when you said that, how do I know the Tao? I look inside of myself and see. And then interesting, when I was thinking about your lecture today, just a sentence came out that I quickly wrote down. It says that we can only validate the essence of our existence through the deepest internal experience of awareness within us. So we can only validate the essence of our existence through the deepest internal experience of awareness within us. And especially it came to me, like I felt connected to this sentence when you were talking about how when you are in meditation, sometimes you see these images, and then how there is that plane of consciousness, that consciousness we are embedded, that there is this holographic imprint of every memory, and maybe some of those are attracted to you, they come to you for whatever reason. And I also thought that Taoist studies should be an integral part of consciousness studies, because the Tao is the super consciousness, isn't it? Tao, we are embedded in consciousness. That is the Tao de Ching is talking about, isn't it? It is just consciousness, everything. And when you said that now is love, that was just the divine message, because when you really are experiencing the fullest feeling of the now, that is such a love resonance, which is the highest vibration everywhere. So these were just the thoughts and feelings your presentation invoked in me. Thank you so much.
Thank you. That's beautiful. Very beautiful. Yeah, thank you, Georgie. Good to hear.
Jim?
Like, I want to encourage our students, don't be bashful to raise your hand. But I have a couple of points in the meantime, Thomas. I would love to hear your story of your encounter with the Tao de Ching. You know, what was your pathway? How old were you? What was the circumstance when you first picked that book up? Because Georgie's making an important point, as you did, and I in my opening, that when you encounter a great book, what makes it great is you feel challenged, you feel encountered, almost like an encounter with the beloved. And so I'm always interested in people's narrative of the pathway that led them to that initial encounter.
Yeah, I think the Tao found me, I think when I was 21. When I was 19, like I always had a strong kind of prayer practice already when I don't know, 8, 9 years old. I was praying every evening for myself, and I kind of didn't connect much to the Catholic Christian quality that I felt in our local community, but I felt always like the closeness, the practice always attracted me. When I was 19, I started to meditate regularly every day, and when I think was 21, I started to read about all kinds of traditions, and I think the Tao was one. That was one of my earliest discoveries, and immediately I felt I don't know, I knew that's the book. I don't know, I felt, every time I opened it, it's like it's a never-ending source of wisdom. And then I took it to my 4-year meditation retreat, and I contemplated it. And in a way, it's interesting because I think it was 4 years ago, I was invited to China, and there was a lecture in Beijing in front of, I don't know, 500 people, and the lecture and afterwards a discussion was about the ancient wisdom, Chinese wisdom of the Tao de Ching. And so suddenly I find myself as an Austrian coming to China and speaking to the local wisdom. But in a way, that was also amazing because I invoked a lot the wisdom that's in the Chinese culture, the deep ancientness of the Chinese philosophy and wisdom. And people found it so touching, like to reconnect to their own tradition through somebody that comes from the outside. Was kind of interesting. And there I felt also like there was the strong presence of the Tao in the room. It was very powerful. So that was my journey in a way, some cornerstones of my journey.
The thing that I have always found so powerful about the Tao, unlike most other ancient scriptures and texts, is the lack of patriarchal consciousness, the lack of approval of institutions like slavery, the lack of denigration of nature, most fundamentally, the lack of the emphasis on transcendence. I think the fatal flaw of most of the axial religions is that they're always interested in getting to heaven and being with God, sort of up there, out there. And this life is subordinated and denigrated. And you have to kind of, like the Bible or the Quran, Torah, Bhagavad Gita, the Analects of Confucius, you've got to work your way through the cultural anachronisms to get to the gem. But in the entirety of the Tao de Ching, I don't think there's any residue of that. There's glimmers, but whoever wrote that, whoever codified it, as you so powerfully indicated, went right to the heart and then spoke and wrote from the heart out rather from the outside in. Because when you approach the mystery from the outside in, you always mediate consciousness and experience through the a priori categories of cognition, right? And so I just wanted to note that and get your comment, because Lao Tzu, if you know, he was the author, you know, really went deep into the heart of existence, and from that place recited, you know, that the name that can be written is not the true name, et cetera, with which the book begins. But what's your comment on that?
Yeah, I think that's very true. I think that when we deepen, like the deeper we read it, the more what you said right now becomes very obvious, that it's a state transmission from a very deep place that kind of emerged from, and that's why it's like, that's what I often say, that sacred texts are not letters that are closed, which means they define a certain reality, but they actually open. And when you read it and you deepen, so it informs any kind of reality, because they are all already included in that deep state from which that has been written or emerged, or I don't know, however we want to call it. But yeah, I totally agree. I think that's the nature of the sacred text, right?
Yeah. You know, and it's worth noting that in China, with the Communist Party that denies the efficacy of religion generally according to Marxist principles, the only exception is the Taoists. They have not only given the Taoists their sacred mountains and sacred shrines, but they've included the Taoists in their campaign around what they call ecological civilization. So it's very interesting that because they reached the essence, they can interact in a mature, dynamic way with even an entire authoritarian regime that negates the religious, because the regime understands that they're not religious in that fundamental way. So anyway, thank you for that comment. We've got 3 people lined up. Catherine, why don't you come on board?
Hello.
Hello. You can show your video if you'd like.
It's not
Doesn't
giving
matter.
me the option to show my video.
Yeah.
But let me see.
It's in the lower left. But not to worry. Let's just get
it's
on
okay.
with the question.
Yeah, that's perfect. So my question is around Vipassana and the body scan meditation, and you were speaking about inner vision, and I'm just curious, when I also feel my connection and related to the planet, like energetically, I feel I have the ability to connect with the planet, to energetically feel my roots growing deep. And I'm really curious, is this my imagination, or is this, what are your thoughts around this, Thomas? And thank you so much.
Yeah, basically, as the Tao also writes, there are different levels of, like, different states. And I think one state is our reunification with our own body, like that the splits inside of us get healed more and more. So there can be both. When I can imagine my connection to nature, or I can feel my connection to nature, which means I'm feeling the unification, or that nature is already included in my body. And that's why I feel, as a deep resonance, I feel nature itself. So I'm part of it. And I think what we are, when we heal different levels of trauma and ancestral trauma, so we get a sense again that actually, yeah, I'm not, like, my body is the planet. And so then it's not an imagination. The more that sense of interdependence or interbeing arises, again. So then it's that's not an imagination. That's I think man follows the earth, follows the universe, follows the Tao. Mhm.
Deeply, deeply grateful. Thank you so much, Thomas. I really appreciated your teaching and transmission today. Thank you.
Thank you, Catherine.
Thank you, Catherine. And you know, it's a gossamer and nuanced distinction between imagination, projection of psychic contents, what's being mediated from the other side in, dreaming. So I think your answer is very apt, Thomas. You know, you're entering into a reality of deep mystery. And imagination, Catherine, I think can be the most real thing in the world. Remember Einstein, that imagination is far more important than knowledge. So well done. Well done.
That, Jim. Thank you.
Leo Jacoby, let's get you up.
Yes. Hi, Jim.
Hey, Leo.
I feel I'm more ecumenical than you about the great wisdom traditions directed by the model Thomas started with. A sacred text contains the reader. My appreciation of Christian gospels began when guided by a Jesuit to find myself in the story. And I tried to shorthand today's discussion with the hyphen as a symbol for that which links our dialectical language. And Thomas, thank you for your loving voice and presentation. You allowed me to play with the words and invite them to dance with silence.
That's beautiful, Leah. Very beautiful. Thank you.
Okay, good. Well, thank you, Leo, very much. And now we want to get to Laura Madsen, who you know quite well, Thomas.
That's true.
Laura is one of the students, everyone, in our joint program between Thomas's Academy of Inner Sciences and our Wisdom School, and has been an absolutely stellar doctoral student, as Georgie will testify. So, Laura, welcome.
Oh, thank you. I'm afraid I don't have control of being on video.
Not to worry.
Oh, okay.
It's all right.
Yeah. So, yeah, Thomas, I much like Georgie, it's kind of where your teaching landed. Is just such profound gentleness. Like my body feels like it's swimming in. I can't even describe it. It goes beyond nervous system relaxation in any case. And then I realize, oh my God, this is where you teach from all the time, Thomas. You're teaching from the energy of the Tao. That's this profound gentleness is the only way I can say. So there's no forcing. There's a support and a blossoming. I mean, certainly what I've felt from the time I came within your radius at a certain point, because I met you in 2012. It's a while ago now, but when I started to work more focused with you in 2015, you ended up coming to the house here. It just was like, now I feel why I was so drawn in such a gentle way, and it's like I'm blossoming in this place. Anyway, I don't even know how to. It's not even a thank you. It's just an awe, I think, of your ability to put this profound movement into words and to attract such a variety of people. Personally, I've struggled with the huge variety of all kinds of people, but it's a testimony to the openness and gentleness of your teaching too. So anyway, thank you. All I can say is thank you. It's beautiful. It just clarified for me, this is why I'm doing a doctorate. I never thought I'd be doing a doctorate, how it's emerging in me is a flow. It's like I'm being led. So it's like, oh no, I didn't think I'd be doing inner constellation work. That was all original work that came through me. And my silence practice stuff. So anyway, thank you. Thank you. And for Ubiquity being there to plant the doctorate in, it's just like, whoa, it's just such a field of grace. Thank you, Thomas.
Thank you, Laura. These are so beautiful words, and I'm very happy about you describing how the flow takes you and how you follow the flow in your own life. That's a very beautiful thing to say.
Yeah, I'm learning to have more and more faith in that. Like I commented in that in the chat, that it takes the ability to relax enough to realize you're held in this greater movement. And that's what I'm learning more and more to trust in. And so my reactivity, my defensiveness, all of that we would call trauma is finding its place. And there's more and more rest in the work I do, and even how I write, more transparency, I guess. So it's just opening new doors.
Beautiful, Laura. Thank you. Thank you for sharing.
Thank you, Laura. We have someone from China, it looks like Thomas Yanjung Song, who says that when I was in high and middle school in China, the high pressure from study was too much for me. Like many of my classmates, I tried to manage 10 minutes reading the Tao de Ching each day, which took me out of my personal bubble with deep release, which was a big help for me. And I think that that's a whole domain you haven't touched on, but I'd like to just have you expound on, as we bring this session to a close, on the interrelationship, as Yan Zheng experienced, that it was the Tao de Ching and the reflections on the mysteries expressed there that allowed her to deal with the trauma of the school system that was basically beating students down, and the suicide rates, the mental illness, depressions, anxieties that ensue from competitive trauma-based education. So say something to us as you've experienced it, as someone who's deeply immersed in the Tao de Ching, but also someone very deeply immersed in transgenerational trauma. You know, and Thomas, by the way, everyone is now, looking into what he can do in terms of Ukraine, because that's a huge trauma between Eastern and Western Europe that's being played out because of wounds that have never been transformed. So just comment on that complexio, Thomas.
Yeah, in a way, I think you named it already, like that. That when we, the book, the Tao de Ching, is like a mediator, it's like a plug-in. And when we read it, and we allow ourselves, I often say, the open letters of a sacred text become fiery letters within our consciousness. So when we read them, they become like fiery, almost like a psychoactive substance in us. And it has an effect. So the Tao nourishes everything, cares for everything. We tap into that. And especially, I think, because when we talk, when we listen to the teachings of the Tao, like Laura said, we are being connected to the river, like what I call the river of living. And trauma is a very strong reduction of the original movement. So we can say the healing is the restoration of the original movement, and trauma is a reduction, it's a freezing, it's a holding, it's a contracting, it's an absencing. And so that's why I believe that the transpersonal dimension, that trauma healing is not just a human activity, it's also a human activity supported by a much bigger transpersonal force, like the Tao, the nourishing part of the Tao, and the immanence of spirit. And so that, and when we read about it, it's also what you wrote. Then I was kind of released from my personal bubble, because that's how we feel when we feel more separate. We feel like we are kind of in an isolation within ourselves, and it's hard to connect horizontally and vertically. But the reading like wisdom texts like the Tao reconnects us more. And I think for especially working on collective trauma is so big. It was here before we were even born. And so that we need the light of spirit to go into the underworld. We don't want to go there like and get lost and then drown in depression or drown in the disconnect that it brings. And I have seen groups working, for example, the after effects of the Holocaust. And in the moment when you touch the real shadow, it feels so heavy. It feels so, and if we don't have that inner connection to the light, to the inner light, then it's just hard. But if we go in purposefully into that part of our deepest pain, but with light, then it's our mission. And then we can do it, because we go in with that inner strength, with that inner shining, and then we don't get lost in it. Because as Ziggy Jung said already, the forces of the collective unconscious are super strong. And we are just individuals within a collective ocean. So as a separate individual, I cannot do collective trauma healing. But when we are connected to a much bigger context, then the collective trauma is smaller in relation to that bigger context. And I think that's a very powerful resource. That's why in our training programs, when we train collective trauma facilitation work, the spiritual dimension is a must. I think it's something we have to be part of in order to do that work sustainably without burning out, and being able to face such a strong pain without drowning in it.
You know, I was thinking, this is just the final domain. I'd love your comment. I was just thinking, you know, if you had to think of an equivalent scripture in the West, my view would be the Kabbalah. Because I think there was something birthed in 12th century Spain, like the Tao de Ching. It's a work of kind of crystalline purity that from the instant it was written, it stood outside time and accessible to cultures everywhere, because it was so deeply embedded in eternity. And so, I mean, just as we, in the spirit of Leo's notion of different scriptures and so forth, have you reflected on the relationship between the Tao de Ching and the Kabbalah?
I think it's totally on. It's totally on. I love Kabbalah, and I think it's very, very true. It's very concentrated as well.
Yeah.
It's very powerful. Yeah. No, it's I completely agree with you. Yeah.
So, Thomas, just say a word about next month. What's going to be the subject covered, or the approach?
Yeah, we will continue, and we will go more. This time we talked about the immanence and transcendence and the emptiness. Next time I chose already, like I have some Tao verses that connect us more to our way of living and to some kind of an ethical roadmap, or kind of how to address our day-to-day experience with the support of the Tao, and some guidance that we find in some of the verses. So that's what we'll dive into that more next time.
Thank you, sir. Dr. Hübl, everyone. One of our most recent doctoral candidates, who passed his oral exam with an extraordinary aplomb. So thank you so much, Thomas. We'll see you next month. Remember, everyone, it's just the second Tuesday of each month at 10 o'clock Pacific time. See you all then. Bye for now.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you,
both of you.
Thomas. Thank you so much.